Good day, everybody. This is the Ecclesiarch here, back with some more Warpforge, and today I'm starting a new series called The Voice of the Community. And the reason I'm starting this series is quite simple. Currently, we lack a community manager for Warpforge, which means that a lot of player complaints, feedbacks, or even praise is not delivered to Everguild, or whenever it's delivered, it's too little too late. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be gathering feedback from Discord, from directly the players, and then sending it to Everguild compressed in a video like this, so that it makes life easier for everybody. Now, for the next episode, I'm already going to be making a form which you guys can fill out and let me know of the issues that you find most important, and that's how we're going to do episode 2. For episode 1, I have already gathered a lot of feedback from Discord, as well as spoken to some players, and basically today I'm going to be talking about some of the most important issues that Warpforge is currently facing. Now, as for number 1, this should not come as a surprise for anybody, and I think that this is the most important thing that should need change to Warpforge, change in Warpforge, and a lot of players seem to be with that. And that is the absolute lack of balance hotfixes. Now, before you think that I'm just asking for balance like nerf hammers and slamming some factions with nerfs, let me explain what I mean. Currently, as you all know, the only faction that is really playable is the Ultramarines, and plus the orcs who counter Ultramarines. And by orcs, I'm talking about Gaskell control. Other than that, it's very, very difficult to play anything else. And that has happened due to the Ultramarine reinforcement that introduced the Predator tank first of all. The same thing happened when the Tau were introduced to the game. The same thing happened when Gaskell could drop 2 grots. The same thing happened during pre-season Ultramarines. And this is pretty sad too, because previously, we had a very good meta where you could play almost anything. The current problem with the Ultramarines is not that they're overpowered. Overpowered is normal, because there are always some things that are going to be stronger than other things in a card game. You can never have true balance. But the problem is when something doesn't have any counterplay. And these 4 examples that I spoke about are the case, because the Predator tank is extremely durable, it has an extremely powerful ability, and due to all the energy cheat that the Ultramarines have, it can shoot multiple times, as well as come into play on energy 4 or 5 if the Ultramarine player is lucky. And if somebody drops this on energy 4 or 5, well, good luck dealing with that, you've already lost the game. So a thing like that basically is never good for the game. The same thing was with Gaskell, because 2 grots was such a huge tempo boost that nobody could really deal with it. The same thing was with the Tau, because of the way they could reconstruct the board from 0 every single turn. And the same was with the preseason Ultramarines, because their aggro was just unstoppable. So, how can we fix this? I totally understand that whenever Everguild releases something, they cannot just slam it with a nerf the next day, because there are people who are paying money to buy this, right? There are people who paid for the reinforcements, and if you suddenly make the reinforcement shit, well, then you have a lot of angry players who have actually paid money, and I totally understand that. But waiting for 1 month or more to fix this issue is not good, because that means that for 1 month your game is effectively dead. Because I personally know a lot of players who said, oh, you know, I'm just gonna come back to the game when they nerf the Ultramarines, I cannot play in this shit. That kind of includes myself as well. I haven't been playing a lot because it's just not fun. And it's really bad too, because the Alliance is currently dropped, which really breathe some life back into the game, and it's really cool that we have that now, and it's awesome, but it coincided with a very terrible meta. So that's another reason why we need those hotfixes. And Tau reinforcements are currently dropping, and if it does happen that the Tau are in the same crazy state as the Ultramarines, you're gonna have another month of craziness, which is not good. So I think the best way to fix this, as well as a lot of players think the same, we need balanced hotfixes, maybe in 2 weeks. I'm not talking about having this every month, but if you're noticing that the game is currently in a terrible state, and they should notice that because they do have those numbers, win rates, and so on, you need to hotfix something. And in this case, it's the Ultramarines, obviously, because currently people are only playing Ultramarines because it's unbearable. So I think the best way, the most balanced way, is just wait 2 weeks, observe, and then do a balanced hotfix to something that is completely breaking the game. So that is my current opinion on the subject, and I think Everguild needs to take this into account as soon as possible, because otherwise the game is going into a very, very bad state. Now, the second issue that I would like to speak about are the bugs. Now, surprisingly enough, there's quite a few bugs in the game, but there are some that are extremely crucial. So let me point out a couple of very important bugs. Sometimes when you're opening the game freezes and you must restart the game to fix that. There are still bugs when you're shuffling your when you're mulliganing your cards. Some cards get stuck in the air and you cannot play and you have to resign. There are sometimes when you get stuck in the loading screen after you press the battle button, and it still counts as a loss if you alt F4. So basically it permanently says loading and you're never going into the game, and if you alt F4 then it's a loss. The game also freezes during ranked games. You're fighting someone and suddenly neither of you can make a turn, and somebody has to resign, and once again you lose points. So this is making the ranked system extremely frustrating, because imagine you're playing in top 10 or top 1 even, and you're gaining 4 points, and suddenly you lose 50 points because of a game bug. So these bugs have been present for a long time, and I think they need to be fixed as soon as possible. Another minor bug is it's very hard to click on your own cards on the card back during the game to see your own cards. Suddenly became very difficult. You must click on a very specific small area to see it. So I think that also needs to be fixed. So as I said, there's a couple of very weird bugs that are basically not only making the game frustrating, but it's also making ranked climbs frustrating for a lot of players, especially the ones who want to play competitive. So this needs to be addressed as soon as possible. As for number three is kind of connected to number 1. This is quite simple. The problem with this is that we're talking about balance changes basically. So a lot of times we have balance changes where either the nerfs go too far or the buffs make no sense. So let me point out a couple. The first number 1 example, the one that really frustrated a lot of players, was the Gordrang nerf. I understand that the Gordrang nerf, which was removing his stun, was due to the fact that it's kind of inherently toxic because it shuts down a lot of warlords completely, like Sisters or Zexstruck or even Terror of Wondergast. But now you essentially turned Gordrang into a worse version of Terror. He just has +2 on his attack and that's it. Terror has that, but also gains Fly and can also gain buffs on his attack based on how many troops he has. So effectively Gordrang is now dead. Nobody's gonna play him because, well, he's worse. He's the worst version of another warlord, and on top of that, he's been basically killed. Now, what needs to be done is that you can take away something that they see might be toxic, but you cannot just make a warlord a worse version of another warlord. So he needs to get something in return, so as compensation, so that the warlord is still playable. So nerfing something into unplayability is never ever good. The same thing happened to the Ultramarines in preseason. They received so many nerfs that they became unplayable for 2 whole seasons. And the same thing happened back in the day with Imhotep when they went too far with his nerfs and he was again unplayable for 1 season. So you should never go too far with these nerfs. And once again, if you see that the warlord is not being played after a nerf and it completely drops to 0 and a lot of players are complaining, there's always a hotfix to revert something there. Now, on top of that, there are also some buffs that often make no sense. Like, for example, the Sternguard Sergeant gaining 1 health, which was very good that it was reverted, because the last balance patch of the Ultramarines was very good, actually, with Zeal, Sternguard as well as the Chaplain nerf. Those were very good nerfs and they're still playable. Usually what Everguild needs to do is they should avoid buffing S tier cards, because Sternguard was already almost in every Ultramarine deck. Why buff that? Same thing goes with Venom Crawler. A lot of people have mentioning the problem with the Venom Crawler because Venom Crawler was already an S tier card, and that's the card that received the buff and not some other cards that desperately need it. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not a rant to nerf the Venom Crawler. No. What we are saying here is that often cards that are already good are receiving buffs instead of the cards that are bad. Now, one thing that was very good and Everguild really received praise for was the change they did to Necrons and Ultramarines. They made a lot of vanilla cards playable, and that is what players are looking for. They want to see the bad and unusable cards actually do something, and that pushes a lot of archetypes. Like currently, Ultramarines have three archetypes at least: the aggro, the vehicle, and the big marine, which is great. That's what people are looking for, right? Although the vehicle obviously is overpowered currently. But if Everguild smashes the vehicle deck and completely nerfs it into the ground, then an archetype is dead. So that's something we want to avoid. And if, for example, Everguild decides to buff, let's say, a very good Ultramarine card, which is, let's say, the legendary Shield of Humanity, Humanity Shield, that would not be good because it's already an S tier card. What the players really are asking for is the buffs for unusable cards for more factions, and the number one candidate for that is the Saim-Han. The Saim-Han have been neglected for a long time, and this is not because they're underpowered or anything. No, mind you, I don't think the Eldar are underpowered. They're quite strong, especially Medreal and Eliak. They're quite powerful. It's not about being underpowered. It's about the fact that the Eldar have received no reinforcements and they have received no major patches to their faction. The problem is that no matter which Eldar Warlord you're playing, your deck is literally the same 30 cards. Maybe like either you put Reclaim the Stars in there or not is the main difference. Either you play a Reclaim Eldar or Full Tempo Eldar. That's basically what we're seeing, and the Eldar have like a ton of vanilla cards that are not being used at all. And currently there is a huge frustration with the Eldar players, and rightfully so. And that's what the players are looking for. All of the factions slowly to be gaining some interesting ways to play, because as I said, the Necron and Ultramarine patch was amazing, and we need that as soon as possible for other factions, starting with the Eldar most probably. On top of that, what the players are also asking are buffs to some big legendaries like the Avatar of Cain, like Istar Kandar Kaon, and the buffs should not just be vanilla stats like Kaon gains a shield or Avatar gains health or gains attack. It's always better to give them something special. An example of a good buff was making Kato Sicarius Codex, which was really good, and making Triumph of Saint Catherine have a better active ability. That was also very good because that makes those cards somewhat playable, while just buffing their stats is not the way out. It's uninteresting. So this issue would be nerfing factions into unplayability, nerfing cards into unplayability, and buffing already good cards. The same problem happened with Tau. I would also like to mention that Tau received a ton of nerfs. I can totally understand that maybe that was considering the fact that they are receiving some reinforcements, but nevertheless, there were some very weird nerfs to the Tau, like the nerf to the Dark Strider, which was never really a problematic card, the nerfs to the Breacher Shasui, which was never even played at all. So there are just some nerfs that just seem out of the blue that really don't do anything. So that is one of the other issues that the player base have expressed. Now, I'm sure that there are quite a few more issues that players would like to point out, but I think that these three things are the main issues. The bugs, the lack of attention to unplayable cards, as well as certain factions, and unreasonable buffs or nerfs, as well as the main thing, the lack of balance, hotfixes that are basically ruining the game. I think these three things are the most crucial things that Everguild need to focus on currently in order to make sure that the game is up and running in a way that players are enjoying that. Now, for the next episode, I will already be using a form, and I will make sure to gather even more feedback from you guys and make sure to push some of the most important issues on the channel in order to deliver this to Everguild, and as I said, to establish some sort of communication between us and make everybody's life a little bit easier. So I hope you enjoyed that. I would love to hear some of your comments, and yeah, Ecclesiarch out.